if it's low, it's not always good.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be like, you get what you pay.
Definitely.
So you got to look at the value. You got to look at what am I getting for what I'm investing in, or what am I paying for. So we got to look at that. So it's not just chasing after the lowest price or the lowest city or community that's offering those those properties, right? It's about finding great fundamentals in certain markets.
Welcome to another episode of the TF Team podcast. I'm your host this week. Guess what? Josh is away. I finally get the whole podcast to myself. Lord knows where Josh is, but I'm so happy that we have Kevin Hoang again, a second time in a row. So thank you again for joining us. And this week, we're probably going to talk a bit more about some of the strategies. But to kind of recap, for some of the people that probably weren't there last week, could you tell us a bit about yourself, Kevin?
Yes, thanks, Pierre. Thanks for having me on again. I'm a real estate developer, real estate investor, and mortgage broker. And like I said, the last time I wear a bunch of different hats, but I am an active investor in the Canadian real estate market as well as the U.S. And I'm always looking to educate, provide value, provide insight for people that are interested, and for my clients specifically that are looking to get into the real estate market, looking to become a first-time home buyer or first-time investor. That's sort of my bread and butter, because going through it myself, I feel like my experience and the experience of my clients, I'm able to provide a lot better, explanations and share my experience to help them get into the market.
And that's why you and I are kind of simpatico, because we're both about educating, right? So it's about not only educating, current clients and future clients to get a piece of that Canadian dream, right? That
Absolutely.
Piece of that home ownership. So what are some things that we can do? Individual, if you're looking for your first-time home buyer, let it be you're an international student who got your permanent resident and now you're embarking on that road towards success, and we want to build those roots. So what could we possibly do to get that first home?
So the first thing I think that's really important is employment, right? So if you're, we're going to fast track now. So a student that has permanent residency now, they must have been working for a few years.
That's right.
Met the requirements, invited, by the Canadian government to become a permanent resident of Canada. So that job that they worked, it's important to have a stable one, predictable income, whether it's hourly or salary, right? And from there, that would sort of help determine the budget in which market you should explore. Of course, the down payment is important. Depending on where you lived and how aggressive you were in terms of saving and investing, that would help contribute to your down payment, of course. So those are the first two things I would highly prioritize above everything else. Of course, your credit rating, the entire time that you were in Canada studying, by this stage, it could be like let's just say 2, 3, 4 years now. If you were paying your credit cards on time and your bills on time, that would definitely contribute. But that's something like you retroactively can't change, of course. So home ownership requires a lot of dedication, preparation, and discipline. But save as much as you can, because every dollar does count. And the more down payment that you have, and the more income that you can earn, the more choices you have in terms of which markets to look into.
And you mentioned a couple of things that is within the control of the individual. And one of the things we talk about eligibility is that job stability, because you're at that stage where you're thinking of jumping from job to job, and that has a kind of a negative impact on your credit score, right?
Well, it has more to do with not the credit score portion per se, right? But it has more to do with what a lender would look at, right? So if you're looking to move jobs, there's really nothing wrong with that. If the pay is more, if it's somewhat related to your field, it looks a lot better, right?
Yes.
It makes sense. You were a junior here, you moved over here, you're getting paid a little bit more, and you have a little bit more of a senior role. Makes sense. The story makes sense. But where it kind of gets a little bit funny is if you're just switching jobs for the sake of getting like maybe $2 more an hour, or $5,000 extra per year. Like if you're just jumping jobs, there's no stability, and then you're gonna have to kind of declare where you've worked the last few years, right? And your T4s, you need to, if you're hourly worker, you need to have 2 years T4s where they average out the income, and it's better. Like, I mean, at that stage, what is that going to look like, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got to put yourself in the perspective of the person lending you the money. Like, would you lend money to somebody where you don't see the stability in employment? It's a tough ask.
No, definitely. So I'm stable and moving, progressing in my career within the first 3 to 5 years. I've paid off my credit cards in full. I've got a decent credit score. Actually, having said that, what would be a decent credit score that you could, look at potentially getting approved for a mortgage?
So they say 680 plus is like pretty okay, pretty good. 700 plus, like I think in the 700 plus is pretty reasonable, based on what I've seen. And people, there's always exceptions, of course, but you want to keep your credit score as high as possible, right? And you want to pay off your debts, your monthly bills, your credit cards, and you want your utilization to be reasonable. So the 30% and lower tends to be that number where let's say you have a $10,000 credit card limit, you use $3,000 and less, and then pay it off, pay off the balance every time. The issue starts arising, and let's put ourselves in the perspective of the lender, right? If you have credit card bills that are, your limit's $10,000 and you're using $9,000, and every month it's floating around $8,000 to $9,000, there's a little bit of risk there, right? Because you're using a lot of debt. If something doesn't go well, then you're going to miss payments. So
exactly.
That definitely, people might not realize this, but it does impact the credit score.
No, excellent. And we always preach about exactly what you talk about, to stay within that utilization limit, to stay below that, that 30% utilization. Now, a young Kevin starting now, all right? Yeah. Not back then. So given what you know now, right? So if we have this young Kevin looking to buy his first home, what would he be looking at? I know you kind of touched a bit about it last week, but where would you look? What would you be looking at?
So I don't want to give people the wrong ideas, but I do want to say the first thing I would look at is the prices first, right? And the prices, let's look at it like I always have the two sides of the coin situation. If it's low, it's not always good, because there's going to be like, you get what you pay.
Definitely.
So you got to look at the value. You got to look at what am I getting for what I'm investing in, or what am I paying for. So we got to look at that. So it's not just chasing after the lowest price, or the lowest city or community that's offering those those properties, right? It's about finding great fundamentals in certain markets. What types of employers exist in those cities, right? Is there diversity in terms of the type of employment? Because let's say, for example, we always talk about like the auto industry as being that prime example, right? In Windsor and Detroit, when things were booming. But because a city like Detroit and Windsor, they're so heavily dependent. I don't think they're as much as they were back in the day.
You're correct.
But because they were so heavily dependent on the auto industry, so many people in the city were employed by these employers. When things go bad, it goes really bad. So I look at things like, what are public jobs, meaning government types of jobs, because they tend not to be affected as much by the status of the economy, right? Because like, for example, let's look at Sudbury, for example, right?
Okay.
Because Sudbury is one of the markets I invested.
Okay.
I didn't want to...
Far away, but good.
I didn't want to reveal too much, because then it gives people that idea like, okay, well, I'm pushing that market, but I want it to kind of remain neutral, but I have to kind of give a shout out to Sudbury. Because why? Sudbury is great. Sudbury has so many diverse job opportunities. They have mining. They also have public sector, meaning government jobs, like in healthcare and hospitals, as well as CRA, right? And
the big nickel.
That's what they call it,
Yeah.
the Sudbury,
Yeah.
right? So there's so much types of different employers. So let's say one kind of doesn't work out so great because of tariffs, for example. Let's just say, let's pretend tariffs impact, right? Okay, well, the government is still collecting CRA is still going to be, receiving tax returns every year, regardless of whether the economy is good or bad.
Yeah, you're right.
So the way I look at it is, what type of employers exist? How impacted are they to the economy, and as well as immigration, right? So immigration is a key determinant in population size in Canada specifically, because in most places around the world, because birth rates are very low.
Exactly. Yeah.
So knowing what I know today, there's a lot of programs there. They might have been on pause now. I have to confirm this, but they were attracting a lot of people to go and live in Northern Ontario, not just Sudbury, Timmins, as well as North Bay, because the population there, there's an existing community, but they need more of like an influx or stimulus in terms of skills, in terms of education, in terms of also financials as well, right? Meaning like people that immigrate there, they'll bring money there, they'll buy properties there, and they'll also raise their families there, right?
Yeah.
So what I realize is that people go where the jobs go, of course, but there's always government incentives and government encouraging certain behaviors. So like I said, I'm not trying to be biased towards Sudbury, but because I invest there, I know that market really well, and I use that same template to invest in other markets. How insulated is this city or this community from bad situations? Right?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, I look at Windsor because it's funny. Okay, I'm going to give a shout out to Barrie because that's where we bought a place.
Shout out to Barrie.
to Barrie. But Windsor, we were looking at Windsor, and you're right. The prices in Windsor were really, really low. And why? Well, because of all those kind of negative factors that you kind of talked about. It was primarily when we were looking, an industry town, which is, the car manufacturer. Yes, there's, university and stuff like that. But if we invest, when we take our money out, are we going to make a good profit or not? So those factors that you look at comes into play. Not only when we do the analysis when it comes to, and my students will know, when we do analysis in terms of stocks, we look at a whole bunch of factors, and we should be doing kind of the same thing when we're looking at real estate. So even this old guy could learn a few things, even today. So having said that, right? So let's say Sudbury or any place else. What goes into buying kind of that first home? You talked about the down payment. How much do I need, and what do I expect from the mortgage side per se? What would you be looking at? Here I am coming to you. I've seen this house. What will make me approved or not approved by a lender?
Okay, so that's a really tough question to answer without seeing a file.
Yeah.
But I'll kind of just guide you through the process.
Yes.
Okay. So at this stage, before you even go look at a property, you want to know what you're going to be approved for. So we're going to have that conversation where you're going to send me your docs. I'm going to send you a list, employment. I just want to see maybe like what kind of debts you have, and then the credit score, we'll find out about it later. So you can't hide from it, essentially. But I just want to have a little bit of a preview. Like I said, income, debts, what else? I'm trying to think here. Down payment, like where it's coming from, how much you have. And then at that stage, we're going to go and you're going to shop.
Okay. Now, would it be okay if the down payment's coming from mom and dad?
Of course, it's fine.
Perfect.
Well, I shouldn't say it like that. It's okay, depending on what you're buying the property for, first and foremost. But gifted funds, if it's from immediate family like mom and dad, it's okay. And why I say that is because programs are changing all the time.
Okay.
So when I first got into this, you weren't allowed gifted funds for investment property, depending on certain A lenders. But then after they changed that, so you're allowed gifted funds, but for principal residents, you are allowed gifted funds for the most part.
Okay, excellent.
Right?
Good to know.
Yeah,
very, very good to know.
Yeah.
So I've got my down payment. My credit score is decent. Now you're gonna kind of give me a guide based on all that I've given you all my numbers. Yeah. You're gonna give me a guide as to how much I could afford.
Absolutely. Now let's say for example you can afford $500,000. this is where the rubber really meets the road. Okay, I do this for all my clients because I'm an investor first, and I'm focused. Like I understand like what goes into a good property and not so good of a property. So obviously, you need to find a great realtor, of course, right? And with that great realtor, they're going to be able to help you, obviously negotiate the prices, right, that you should be paying, but also understanding what is behind that property, right? So, like $500,000 in. You can buy a $500,000 property in the great area or in a not so good area. So you got to know the areas really well. So your realtor should be able to help guide you. And the places where I've invested or purchased properties, and also not just for me, but in my own, I guess, client database at this point, like I know which areas are good, which areas are bad. Like I have an idea, and I could be able to help facilitate and inform a little bit better. So I always focus on the better area. There's a premium, of course, on a better area, but I also think, like, let's think about it, Pierre. Would you want to live in an area that you are not comfortable living in, right? If you put yourself, whether you live there or you don't live there, let's say you rent it out, if you don't want to live there because of you're afraid of the area, what about your tenants, right?
Exactly.
So my emphasis is trying to find the best asset for that client. I know it's very strange, but I've gone through a lot of walkthroughs with my clients as well, only because it's something that is a passion of mine. I want to make sure that I pass on the knowledge in a practical setting so people could understand, not just kind of like behind the screen and not just through Zoom and Google Meets and phone calls. Like I actually want to be able to provide that extra insight. Sometimes sometimes if I'm not, we'll do like maybe like a FaceTime. Of course, that realtor is somebody that I would know or at least trust enough to be able to kind of facilitate, that walkthrough for them. But people get emotional when they go look at properties. That's another problem. Right. They might be in love with the property, and there's a lot of things that go behind choosing the right property. But what do they say? People lie. Men lie, women lie. Numbers don't lie. Let's look at the numbers first, but then also look at the things that are off balance sheet, right? Because those things that don't show up in the numbers, those qualities need to be kind of accounted for on top of the numbers. That qualitative assessment as well. Because we did talk about 500,000 in a bad area, 500,000. You could get maybe a $500,000 property that has like 4 units, and maybe that $500,000 property in the great area is, maybe 2 units. But then you're like, oh, the rents are higher here because I could rent out more units here. But then you're dealing with more like maybe like issues potentially, because obviously more tenants, means more people to handle.
Potential issues and so on.
And because this is in a not so desirable area, you've kind of eliminated the tenant pool. You made it smaller. So having said that, there's a lot of things we need to evaluate on top of the numbers. So it's definitely a conversation we got to have over a dinner or lunch. It's a lot, right? But,
I like that.
But overall, like just kind of the gist of it is like kind of to summarize it all, like we have your budget. We're gonna go look for the property, and then once we have the properties in mind with the realtor, we're gonna kind of sit together as a team, evaluate like what offer you're actually gonna put in, because does it make sense? Like do you really want to bid up a property unnecessarily? Maybe you don't. Where are we in the market today? Is it a buyer's market, seller's market? What did we see wrong with the property that we can visually see? Maybe knock off like 10, 15K. There's a crack in the basement, you know? So we need to be well informed and well educated before even doing the walkthrough and even getting your pre-approval, in my opinion.
We talk about education. We've talked about knowledge. Hopefully we're very, we got a great deal of knowledge from Kevin that we could use to go on and buy our first property. This is why I like Kevin. I think I like Kevin more than I like Josh.
Don't say that.
Could you come back? Could you come back? Right? It'll be the Kevin and Pierre show going forward. But no, this was great. We're all about educating and providing knowledge to people, because we don't just want Pierre, Kevin, and Josh to grow. We want everybody to learn and to grow. So I could talk to you forever. I hope that you could come back and impart a bit more wisdom in the weeks to come. So I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Always have fun coming here. It was great last time. It was great this time. I'm looking forward to the next time we come back.
I'm hoping it was better this time than last time, but no comment. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Another end to a great episode. Please subscribe to our channel. If you like it, please click on you like, and we'll see you next week. And yes, Josh will be back next week, and I'll be on my usual to his left. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you again to our special guest, Kevin.